what would indicate that you should conduct the functional behavior? Well, if you're trying stuff with this individual and it's not helping, it's not lessening that behavior, you really need to have an FBA because you don't know what that function is. If you realize that now the behaviors are gaining momentum, they're happening more often, they're getting more difficult, they're escalating in some way, then a functional behavior should be done. If you're really not sure why that behavior, you have no idea, you're not seeing an antecedent, well, that would be a reason to do a functional behavior. Leading right into the next one, if you don't know what that antecedent is and you can't identify, you're not able to identify that, if there's a reinforcer for it, then an FBA should be done. If you start to see patterns or trends that are forming, that would be a great time to start a functional behavior, to really look into that. If you're not seeing any cause and effect with the individual, if they're going to do the behavior no matter what, that would be a reason. If you've tried to provide consequences or rewards and they're not effective, and if the individual you're working with just is not affected at all and doesn't seem to care about your attempts to address the behavior, a functional behavior should be completed. Again, we've talked about when you do a functional behavior, you have to know what that target behavior is. You have to have it clearly defined. Otherwise, you can't really figure out what's going on with the individual. And I provided like a poorly defined one. Individual is too active as the behavior. I really don't know what that is, so it would be hard for me to know how to find the function of that. And if the replacement behavior is said, we just really need them to settle down. That's not clear either. What does settle down look like for this individual? It would be better if it was stated the individual leaves the seat and hits peers during game time. That provides a clearer picture of what we're looking at. The individual stays in the seat and keeps it. The individual stay in his seat and keeps his hands to himself. That's what we want them to do. So it really gives a picture of what we're wanting of these individuals. So once the functional behavior has been completed, then we can go ahead and write the behavior support plan. Remember though that it's a hypothesis. We're really not sure at this time if that's the function and that's the behavior that we're trying to connect with. So, but in that statement, that behavior, that hypothesis statement, you want to define what the behavior it is, what you're thinking the triggers or the antecedents are, what is making that consequence, what is making that behavior continue. And so the overall function of it, is it avoid escape? Is it attention? Is it a tangible object? Is it automatic reinforcement? Also in a behavior support plan, the prevention strategies. How are we most likely going to reduce this behavior from happening? And so that might be changing the environment of where they're at. Might be changing things up. Different people they're associated with and day services. Maybe it's changing up the home life, who's interacting with them. It's talking about personal support. How can we support that individual? It may talk about making some different activities available. It may talk about different ways to prompt or cue. Everything should be in a more positive way anyway. So rather than saying, don't do this, rather than that, give them choices of what they can do. And then it might include what expectations are different for that individual. So we have behavior hypothesis statement, we have the prevention strategies. Now we're going to put the instruction of a replacement skill. So is, how do we replace that problem behavior? How do we teach? How do we get that in place for that person? And the next one, the consequential strategies, how does staff respond to that problem behavior so that they're not maintaining the behavior? How are we addressing it? How are we responding to it? We don't want to reinforce it. So what specifically do we want staff to do? It should be very specific rather than a general statement. So we want all of our staff to know, how do we respond to this individual if they're exhibiting this behavior? And then long term, how are we going to use this to assist this person as they move throughout the next year, days, months of their life? So questions that you might ask yourself when you're working on a behavior support plan: what strategies are we using to prevent the behavior from occurring? Are we currently using any strategies that are working? If so, how can we keep those? What behaviors are we teaching to either replace the problem behavior with more appropriate skill that serves the same function? So if we know that their function is attention, what other behaviors have we taught them so that they can get the attention they need without having that behavior? If we're just saying we want the behavior to go away, but we haven't taught them anything different to address that function, then the behavior is not going to change. It's going to keep manifesting. So what are other skills that are we developing that are incompatible with the problem behavior? So for example, incompatible, if the individual's behavior is known to hit people, how about we teach them we give them the opportunity to carry stuff. That way their hands are not able to hit. So something that's incompatible with the problem behavior. So how do we respond to the behavior so that we prevent reinforcing the behavior itself and making it happen more frequently? Unfortunately, that behavior cycle happens a lot, and inadvertently staff reinforce the behavior and keep it going. And it's not something they're intending to do. They may not have known that was happening. And now they're realizing, oh, every time I do that, this behavior keeps going. That's a problem. Now, how do I fix it? If a crisis plan is needed or the need is there to make everyone safe, how is that being done? So if we know this individual becomes very dangerous, how do we make sure others around them are not around so that they can be in the way of that? Or for that individual, how do we help make them safe? So those are all questions that can help you as you're attempting to, as you're writing your behavior support plan. So unfortunately, once we write a behavior support plan, doesn't mean it's over. So we start out with a hypothesis of why we think that behavior is happening, and we got to monitor it and see if that's what happened. If the behavior didn't get better, then we have the wrong function, or we aren't teaching the correct skills to. We aren't teaching the appropriate skills to get to that function. So it does require us to monitor it, and requires us to keep looking back, collecting data on it, checking to see if it's working. It should be checked in very, very often, every couple months. I mean, at the beginning, to make sure it's actually addressing the need. It should be done not weekly, maybe every couple weeks. But then after that, once it's more successful, you still have to go back to make sure it's addressing that behavior. So when you're monitoring, you're measuring changes in the target behavior, seeing if that target behavior is being altered. The plan should include how often the data will be collected. And it really needs to be data that's easy to collect, because otherwise staff aren't going to be able to do it, and you really want to be able to have it easy to collect and easy to make meaning of. So complicated data collection makes it hard for people to not only do it, but actually to go back and review it and analyze it. So it has to be consistent. And that's the thing throughout, like behavior support plan, we have to have staff that's consistently doing this. It has to be consistent with integrity. Same thing with when we're looking back over it and looking at the data, it has to be consistent, and the data has to be collected with integrity. Effective, we're looking at how do we maintain this maintain the appropriate behavior over time? How can it be generalized? So what's happening in one setting can happen in another. So if we don't necessarily we see success in the residential setting, we want to make sure there's success in the day services, and how do we help cross that over and make sure it's happening over there. So consistency, when, where, who, how is all being implemented. That really needs to be consistent. I keep saying that, but if somebody implements it differently and isn't following the behavior support plan the way it was written, then you won't see changes in that behavior. And you can't be afraid to make changes. You have to be able to know that if we're doing these interventions and these teachings to the behavior support plan and it's not working, it's okay. Let's make changes. Let's see how we can make it different. So when do we need a behavior plan? Well, I would suggest that anytime that you are seeing, like I said, any of these escalations, if you can't address the behaviors, if you can't change them, then you do an FBA and then write a behavior support plan. However, these are required times for your behavior plan. And I've included the codified law for you to look at. Also to know that really it's chemical, physical, mechanical restraints, and then timeout. Those are all require behavior support plan, which means you have to have a functional behavior analysis before you write the behavior support plan. And then I've included the ARSDs that you can look at for reference also. Again, I'm going to go back to, though, if you're having some significant behaviors or you're having any type of behaviors and you can't seem to address them and they're beginning to affect that person and the services and supports that they're receiving, then a functional behavior analysis and a behavior support plan would help with that. So as per our reason for providing these trainings, I've included the roles and responsibilities that were developed with that work group. Oh, I left out the R in case manager. So that should be case manager. These are the roles that the case manager would have in, and then on the other side, of course, the community support provider. But case manager would be, of course, facilitating the ISP team. If they're coming together and they're discussing these behaviors and what's happening, it's really that person's role is to help guide the team to look at what's the function, what's going on with this individual, getting that whole picture. Then the community support provider, of course, would be the one that conducts that functional behavior analysis with, of course, the help of the case manager. They would be able to provide some insight to also what's going on with the individual. The case manager would then review and approve the, they wouldn't review and approve the functional behavior analysis. They would review and approve the behavior support plan. So the community support provider would conduct the functional behavior. They would review past positive intervention supports that have worked, that have worked or have not worked. They would then move on to write a behavior support plan. That would be presented to the case manager. That's where they would review and approve it. It would also be sent on to the Human Rights Committee if necessary. It would be presented to the Behavior Support Committee for their review and approval, and then a plan for collecting data on that. So then the case manager would be documenting in the ISP how the success of the behavior support plan. They would also, of course, if needed and necessary, review any of the highly restrictive procedures that go along with that. And they would also address medications that manage behavior. So making sure that they don't, the harmful effects, the benefits outweigh the harmful effects. And working with the community support provider, they would be the data for collecting and reviewing of the data would happen on a regular basis that was decided upon. And then if, of course, the person or guardian is appealing then the behavior support plan, then they would help guide them in the grievance procedure that the community support provider has in place. Okay, so I've been talking for a very long time. And so this is our time for questions about functional behavior analysis, behavior support plans, and the roles of the case manager and community support provider. Katie, I can't hear you.
Sorry. So Amy Hoekstra asked in the chat box, where in the ISP should the required components of the BSP be documented? The risk section has minimal characters.
That's a great question. And I don't, so where should they be documented on the data that they're collecting on how it's effective? Is that what we mean?
Amy, could you provide a little more clarification on that? I don't. I'm guessing.
Okay.
Maybe.
Well, so we don't say exactly where, but we would want, what we would like to see is it done in ISP programs. Would be a collection of, or would be a good place to house that. And Katie, you know Therap more than I do, so if you have any input on that.
Katie,
yeah.
Can you repeat the question again?
It was where in the ISP should the required components of the behavioral support plan be documented? The risk section has minimal characters. So the ISP in Therap has a section has a section in the for risks on the actual ISP, but the actual data collection should be in an ISP program.
So Amy, when a person has a behavior support plan, do the case managers receive a copy of that written plan once it's all done?
So she wrote another comment. She's talking about the behavioral support plan itself. She's not concerned about data collection. I believe, Amy.
Because you can upload, you can put the identified risk in the risk section, but then you can upload the plan in there as a document.
I'm aware of that, but we were cited in SMART for not having it. We had the plan linked to the ISP in the risk section, but we were cited because the details of the plan were not written out in the ISP. So that's what I'm asking. Where do you write all those different components of the plan that are required within the ISP? Because the risk section does not allow enough characters to do that. So then you have it there, and then what, add a discussion record as well?
I think that this will be one of those FAQ questions we'll clarify.
Yes.
That goes along with this so that it's out there in writing.
I would assume, Amy, every agency that's doing an FBA is going to have, or positive support plan, they're going to have their own formatting. I don't know how that would, attaching it in the risk section, I would think would work. I know that some case management companies attach it to the actual, their plan as an attachment.
Yeah, can you go back to the roles and responsibilities slide?
Yes.
So just real quick, Karen, yes, a flow chart. We will definitely, we can add a flow chart as a quick reference.
I feel like this may be missing, you know, some bullets from that roles and responsibilities document, because there were specific things that are required to be included in the ISPs.
Yeah,
I didn't not necessarily listed here.
There are the finer, like the sub bullets are not listed on this. You are correct.
Yes, so you will need to refer back to the roles and responsibilities document for a full overview.
Yeah, and so if that document then could just say where in the ISP the division expects to see the things that the case manager is supposed to document, or if the whole division can get on board that it's enough just to have the plan linked to the ISP, that would be great. But that's not what has happened in a recent SMART review. We were cited even though that plan was linked.
Yeah, that would be a hard one for us to address right now since we aren't aware of what all went down with that. But yes, we certainly will get back and discuss that and see if there's some more guidance we can provide for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Julie just reminded us again that these slides are not all inclusive of the roles and responsibilities requirements. So we will also want to make sure we are taking a look back at that roles and responsibilities document that the work group has updated. Any other questions?
Are there changes in which provider is supposed to do what? Because I thought the purpose of these trainings was to identify the differences in systems and processes that resulted from this revised roles and responsibilities document. So were there actual changes as to which provider should be doing different tasks? Because I don't necessarily see that, other than there's additional things that case managers are supposed to include in the ISP.
Let me pull up.
You want me to?
No, you're fine. I just need to find that document real quick. So the training needs that were identified within the roles and responsibilities for behavioral support plans was specific to clarifying the case management role in facilitating the team discussion and regarding behavioral support plans and any highly restrictive procedures included in a BSP, that not all behavioral support plans include restrictions, but all highly restrictive procedures require a behavioral support plan, and then outline those expectations for the CSP to conduct the FBA as a prerequisite to a behavioral support plan.
I'm not sure we accomplished the first bullet today. Did you want to speak to that?
So clarifying the case management role and facilitating the team discussion, that's right there, facilitating that ISP. Because these are things that you should be talking about, annually at an ISP meeting.
Or anytime a special team meeting occurs, the case manager would facilitate that discussion.
Is there something more that you're looking for, Amy?
I just feel like, I wear more than one hat. So I see things from the case manager perspective and the CSP's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And from my perspective, in the annual meeting, unless the CSP brings up restrictions or the behavior support plan, I don't see that case managers are bringing that topic forward in the ISP. So I feel like there hasn't been enough emphasis on the role of the case manager in all of this. I feel like they see it as the CSP is just supposed to write this plan and send it to them, but they have a role in facilitating all those team discussions, as well as in the development of the plan. They should be providing the same amount of input as the CSP is. as well as the person and their guardian. It's a full team conversation, and they should be leading that conversation, getting all the input from the various team members and coming to an agreement on what the plan is, and not just expect that the CSP will do all the components and send it to them.
Well, this is Katie Munson. I encourage case managers to have a section, that should be in the individual ISP agenda. If a person, needs a behavior support plan or rights restrictions, those conversations should be happening. But I think it's an individual conversation. It may be quick and it may take a lot more time than just, work after the ISP itself, because it can be very time consuming. That's been my experience.
I agree, and I instruct my case managers to do it too. And there are those that do it really well, but there are those that don't do it at all. And so that's, I guess, maybe that's just a training need of case management.
I also wonder, so DDD expects the behavior support plan to be documented in the ISP. So why I guess I'm kind of confused and curious as to if that is uploaded to the risk section, and then the CSP has so then, that's our role, to document that, yeah, there is a behavior support plan in place. This is what it is. But then can a CSP have an ISP program that follows that behavior support plan without that being linked to the case manager? Or does the case manager need to have that as
So
an
the
ISP program? Does that
CSP, yeah, so the CSP would have an ISP program to regularly collect and review that data. That's how they're going to do that. We can't, with the way our FAIR system is set up, we can't link the ISP program or the ISP that the case managers do to any of those ISP programs that are created. So there's no link, there'd be no linking between there.
So who's really responsible? If the data is, the CSP obviously would be the data collector, right?
The case manager is responsible for linking that behavioral support plan to the risk section of the ISP. The community support provider is responsible for collecting the data, and then as part of quarterly monitoring reviews, your case manager would review that data,
right,
and add that to the quarterly monitoring report.
So the citation that Amy was talking about earlier, I guess that's what I think is throwing me for a loop a little bit.
And we'll get some clarification on that on our end. So we'll add it to the FAQ that, if it's either insufficient or sufficient to just attach that behavioral support plan. So, and like I said, we'll add it to the FAQ and we'll follow up with everybody on that.
I think the other thing to keep in mind is by reviewing all of these and coming to an agreement and having them, it not only will be a reference for the CSPs and the case management, it will be a reference for the division as well when they're doing their SMART. So hopefully that will clear up any inconsistencies there's been through different SMARTs.
Julie Hand says DDD will get more details regarding the instance Amy mentioned and will provide clarification as needed. Are there any other questions? Marva Jones, is there a preference between attaching the BSP and linking the BSP? So Marva, you can only attach, you can't link. Like the two accounts, because we have it set up with oversight, there's no way to link the CSP and case manager accounts together. So essentially what you guys are doing is just attaching that to the ISP. Shelby Wentz, Is the plan approval from the case manager supposed to be submitted to them prior to BIC committee approval? Sometimes the plan is sent back to make changes several times prior to plan in approved committee.
Well, if your ISP team is developing a plan, the case manager is part of that team, you would all agree to that plan prior to sending it to HRC. Your HRC is a voluntary. You want to have as complete of a product as possible before it goes to that committee.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. You're welcome, Marva. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself as well, guys. You don't have to stay muted through this part. I'm hearing nothing.
Katie, I just want to be sure that I think right after it was up a little bit, it might have got missed.
Oh, yes,
There-
Amy Little.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Amy Little with HSA says, should it not be a licensed professional writing a BSP?
Well, if you have access to one, that would be great. But no, there's no licensure required to write a behavior support plan.
Jackie Schoenrock asks, does DDD have a position on the behavioral health module? Jackie, that is a module that we are looking at and in discussions about. So once we know more about it, we will provide information.
I have a question about the bullet point on the case manager side that says medications to manage behavior. Is that specific to chemical like PRNs or something like that?
So that one is specific to any medication that is used to manage behavior. So if the medication that is used to manage behavior, then you would need to discuss and have that discussion about do the side effects, the harmful side effects outweigh the benefits. And so I would have to point you to, I don't know if they've been given that yet, Katie, that, I don't know, but no, that's what that's related to, is back to if it is used to manage their behavior.
Also for psychoactive medications, Jamie.
That's where I was going, thank you.
So that just, you're only referring to reviewing the side effects versus the benefits, and then the elimination reduction that we already do in ISP. It's not like we have to write a behavior support plan for every medication that somebody takes if it's psychotropic. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I just want to point out, I guess, that we were told that all psychotropics need to be run through due process, even if their purpose is not being used as a psychotropic. And a couple of examples that I specifically asked questions about, where we have somebody who's prescribed a psychotropic due to spasticity for CP. And we were told that that needs to be run through for due process. We've also got people that take psychotropics for sleep. And that's what the order is for sleep. And we were told those require due process. So, you know, that means you have to have a medication reduction plan and the statement that benefits outweigh risk. And it can be difficult to come up with those plans when they're prescribed for those types of reasons.
So Amy, I just want to interject here. That was an email conversation you and I had had, and I was doing some follow-up here internally. We are coming up with some additional guidance on that, so I don't want anyone to be alarmed. There will be more detail coming out in the near future on that.
Great, thank you.
Renee, thank you for your comment. I do have that down. Due process would actually probably be another good training to have. And yes, there are, you know, BR's, HRC and BIC recommendations. So, yes. Jamie, the next one is for you. Will today's PowerPoint be available on the portal?
Yes, I have to correct some of my misspellings, little typos, so I'll get that done.
Any other questions?
So before if we're ending soon, depending on questions, I want to make sure that we've given you a lot of information today and about functional behavior analysis and behavior support plan. So please reach out to me. We do have staff that have some experience in doing both of those and would like to be able to help you. So please reach out, and my email's up on here. So before, I'm not saying that there won't be any more questions, but I did want to get that out, that if you are a provider that is thinking that you would like some help, please reach out because we will get that to you.
Thank you for that, Jamie. I'm gonna, if we don't have any more questions about this specific training, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording. So I'll give it one last call for questions. Okay.
There's a question about whether we could get the PowerPoints in advance of the trainings.
Yep, I was going for there, but I just wanted to make sure we didn't have any more questions about this particular training before I stopped recording. So Christy, I'm not quite sure. The groups are working, it's a lot of the groups are between DD staff, CSP case management staff, and maybe some outside entities as well for these trainings. If they have them available prior to the training, we can certainly ask them to send them. I can happily ask to send them out, but I don't know if each group does have them available prior to training. That would be the only problem. We could maybe get one or two, but not necessarily all of them, if that makes sense. Yeah, not a problem. Any other questions in general before I give my closing comment? No? Well, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Jamie, for presenting. It was wonderful. Again, we recorded these sessions, so this session will be on the provider portal. Again, we have to have some of the, the downtime snipped out before we can get it up there. So I will let you know when these are available. As of today, the ICAP training is not available, but please remember you can still go out to the provider portal and have review all the previous ICAP trainings that Julie Johnson Dresbach and Donna Deal have completed. Don't forget that on Thursday, November 4th, we will have our rights restrictions and HCBS settings training. And that is at 10 a.m. Central, which is 9 a.m. Mountain. Again, 10 a.m. Central, 9 a.m. Mountain. So with that, I will give everybody about 25 extra minutes back in their day. Thank you all for joining, and we will see you on Thursday.